Her eyes widened as he counted, and kept counting. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. She held her hands to her face and forgot to breathe for a second as she wondered how could this even be possible. But there was no time to stop and think about what she had done. They needed to make a decision, and fast. Marissa and Chris had been rescuing pit bulls for years, but they'd never seen anything like what they saw that day. She and her husband were already proud dog parents to 10 rambunctious dogs, and life was anything but boring. But realizing that they could do more to help the misunderstood breed, they decided to visit the local animal shelter. These two shared one passion, their love for animals. Marissa shared in an interview that her past relationships had never worked out because of the overwhelming love she felt for these animals. Her partner at the time couldn't wrap his head around the fact that she wanted a numerous family of four-legged friends. But then she met Chris, and their instant connection only blossomed more each day when they continued to share their love for dogs. Many shelters and rescues have an overwhelming population of dogs and cats. Even though they would love to save them all, sometimes it's quite impossible to do so. As they looked around the shelter, they couldn't get one thing out of their minds. The majority of the dogs who were in the shelter were pit bulls. When Marissa and Chris walked into Pibbles and More Animal Rescue, or PMAR, they were bowled over by all the wagging tails and friendly faces. Little did they know, that day they were in for a life-changing surprise. It's no secret that the pit bull breed of dog is often misunderstood. They have big heads and are very muscular. Still, this doesn't mean that they're dangerous. In many states, owning a pit bull is even illegal, so it isn't at all unusual to see so many of this breed in local shelters or rescues. Chris and Marissa know this. They've had their fair share of adopted pits, but still can't quite fathom what the big problem is. They wanted to do more and help in a way that they could. Still, they had no idea what kind of a predicament they were getting themselves into. It's said that this breed of dog is the most dangerous, but no science bears that idea out. Pit bulls are loyal, caring, and loving, but it all really depends on the owners. Unfortunately, people have found ways to exploit such a dog because of their strong appearance. Still, they're not inherently dangerous, and Chris and Marissa were about to meet one incredible pup who couldn't wait to share her love. As they kept looking inside the shelter, Marissa's face fell as she realized that this was going to be an extremely tough choice. She had promised Chris that she would only choose one dog to take home. Then, out of the corner of her eye, she saw her and immediately knew what she had to do. One dog was heavily pregnant. Her belly swayed as she lumbered over to enthusiastically greet the couple. She was a beautiful brindle pit bull, and with one lick from her rough pink tongue, she had won Marissa's heart. She looked into Marissa's eyes pleadingly. Marissa turned to Chris with a look that said, "She's the one." But as soon as they went off to tell the staff, shivers immediately went up and down her spine. They soon learned that the pregnant pit bull's name was Story, and she had been surrendered by a backyard breeder when she had become pregnant, as they could not afford to look after her and her imminent puppies. They knew they had to take her home and provide the mother-to-be with the comfort she deserved. The couple had no idea what they were getting themselves into, but as soon as the vet explained Story's case, tears formed in Chris and Marissa's eyes. The staff at the shelter then told the couple that Story had been due to give birth a week ago already, but they were stumped as to why it hadn't happened yet. She certainly looked like she would give birth at any minute. The worry on the shelter workers' faces told Chris and Marissa all they needed to know. Time was of the essence for Story. She needed help. Just at that moment, she rested her head on Marissa's knee and looked up at her with her big brown eyes as if she were trying to tell her something. That was the tipping point for Marissa, but they couldn't possibly take in another dog who was carrying a litter of 6 puppies, could they? Little did they know at the time, that whole experience was preparing them for something bigger. Taking Story and her puppies home would mean that the couple would have a whopping total of 17 dogs. But Marissa's mind was made up. She couldn't just leave Story here at the shelter. She knew that she had to help her. That's when Chris had an idea. He suggested that they foster Story while the shelter searched for a forever home for her and her puppies. So that's what they did. But there was the troubling matter of her late due date. Why was she not giving birth? Was Story okay? They were stumped. They had no idea why she was delaying her labor so much. With all the dogs they had fostered and adopted, they had never encountered such a problem. As the worst-case scenario began juggling through their minds, they couldn't help but search the internet for clues. But when they read what they did, they couldn't help but feel sick. Dogs and animals in general are smarter than we think. While researching possible reasons why Story was not giving birth, the couple read one article that made a whole lot of sense. The article talked about traumatic events and stress that animals go through when they reach rescue shelters, and more so if they're pregnant. They know that these places are there to help them in some ways, but little do they know if that is the case or not at the time. As they kept reading and gathering information, they became aware that this was far more troubling than they had thought. She could lose her babies if she didn't deliver them soon, but then something else popped up that made Marissa shriek. Dogs who are pregnant want the best for their pups and will hold out on giving birth if they think the situation is unsafe, making this dangerous for mom and puppies. Marissa and Chris immediately looked at each other with worried looks on their faces. They had to go to the vet, and fast. The vet performing the ultrasound couldn't believe her eyes as the shapes began to emerge on the screen. At first, she thought she'd made a mistake, but the faint white outlines were there, as clear as day. She shook her head and turned to the couple, and Marissa's heart sank. What was wrong with Story? The vet took a deep breath and carefully told the couple that there weren't 6 puppies in Story's belly like they had thought. Then he began to count the shapes on the screen and stopped. Marissa watched his finger in disbelief. There weren't 6 puppies. What was the problem, and why hadn't Story given birth yet? The vet was still in disbelief. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. She counted and recounted again, and with a wide smile, she looked at Chris and Marissa and told them something that left them gasping for air. There aren't 6 puppies, but 12. Chris and Marissa immediately looked at each other. How could this be? More importantly, was Story all right? The vet couldn't explain it. She should have given birth already, but the puppies seemed to be doing well. So he sent them all home to prepare for the big day and told them that if she hadn't given birth within 48 hours, they should immediately bring Story in for another examination. What they didn't know was that Story was holding out for a reason. As they left the vet's office, they didn't feel any better. Story was still in danger of losing her babies if she didn't give birth to them soon, and if 48 hours came up and she still hadn't delivered them, that meant the issue would become extremely dangerous. Marissa was nervous. Her heart went out to Story, but what else could she do? As she walked into her home, she had an amazing idea. After reading all they had on the internet about stress and trauma, the couple decided to give Story her own little space. They cleared out a bedroom and put in comfy pillows and blankets so she could feel comfortable and protected. They didn't want to intrude on her too much so she could feel 100% at ease with herself and her surroundings. Little did these two know that as soon as they went to bed, a miracle would happen. Marissa and Chris went to bed themselves after they prepared everything up for Story. Then, that very night, something amazing happened. When they awoke, Story was nursing all 12 of her puppies, and they were all lively and healthy. She had finally given birth during the night. Then they suddenly realized why she had waited. Dogs having puppies at shelters is not the best thing for them. It's stressful for her, stressful for the puppies, Chris realized later. Story hadn't wanted to give birth until she was in a safe and loving environment, and she held out as if somehow knowing that the stars would align to bring Marissa and Chris to the shelter to take her home, where she and her puppies would be cared for. After being in her new home for less than 24 hours, Story gave birth to her puppies. This indeed was an incredible miracle, as they didn't know if it was even going to happen. All she really needed was to feel safe and protected, and thanks to Chris and Marissa, she did. All 12 puppies were beautiful little ones who were more than grateful to be out in the world. In 2 weeks, the puppies had opened their eyes, and Marissa and Chris were falling more in love with them by the second. Soon, they were tearing around the garden on their shaky little legs. Story appeared content and was a loving, devoted mother to her babies. Soon, requests to adopt them came flooding into the rescue center. Although the couple was extremely attached to all the puppies, they decided, with good judgment, not to keep any, and they all found loving homes. One by one, when they were 10 weeks old, they were taken by their new families to their new homes, where they continue to thrive. But what about their mother, Story? Story has found her forever home too. Soon after, a man read about Story's incredible tale on Facebook and couldn't wait to meet her. He fell in love with her immediately and took her into his home. She has a happy life ahead of her now and has been sterilized to ensure that she never has to go through an ordeal like that again. Story was an exceptional mom to all 12 of her pups. She loved licking them from head to toe and nursing them. Chris and Marissa looked on with devotion. This mama has been through so much, and now she could breathe easy as she was in complete safety. But still, all 12 pups needed to find homes. All 12 miracle babies have been adopted by loving families who will protect them and love them every single day. And Story? She did too, but she didn't leave to be with her new family until the very last one of her pups had been adopted, seeing them off as the good mother that she is. If it wasn't for amazing people like Chris and Marissa, Story's story would have been a lot worse. Story's tale is just one of many, and thanks to a dedicated shelter and a couple's love for the breed, she's sure to have a life of happiness. Shelters need all the help they can get, so even if you're unable to adopt a rescue animal, you may be able to foster instead. If you're unable to foster, then you can donate, or even just help spread awareness about rescue organizations and the amazing animals waiting for forever homes there.